morning, everyone. Welcome to teaching learning session of sociology. In this series of lecture, we are discussing about the Indian sociological thinkers. In today's lecture, we'll discuss an eminent Indian sociological thinker, M.N. Srinivas. Before M.N. Srinivas, we discussed various thinkers like G.S. Ghurye. G.S. Ghurye is known as father of sociology, Indian sociology. We discussed about Iravati Karve. Iravati Karve was the first Indian anthropologist, and his work on kinship is very important. Then we discussed about Radha Kamal Mukherjee. Radha Kamal Mukherjee is again a very important Indian sociologist, and his work on values is very important. And in this series today, we will discuss about M.N. Srinivas. M.N. Srinivas was born in Mysore on November 16, 1960, 16 in the traditional Brahmin family. His father was a government servant. Srinivas' intellectual idea was shaped in three universities in which he studied. The first was Mysore University, where he studied social philosophy. Here he was guided by A.R. Wadia and M.H. Krishna. His elder brother was working as a English lecturer, and he inspired him to write various articles. While he was studying in the Mysore University, he wrote many articles which were published in various eminent journals. After completing his social philosophy, where he was guided by A.R. Wadia and M.H. Krishna, he moved to Bombay University. And in Bombay University, he was nurtured by J.S. Ghurye. After this, he moved to the Oxford University. Where he was trained by A.R. Radcliffe Brown and E. Evans Pritchard. Radcliffe Brown was his guide. He enrolled in Oxford University for D.Litt program. After retirement of Radcliffe Brown, Evan Pritchard guided him. At the post-graduation level, Srinivas worked closely under the guidance of G.S. Ghurye. He completed his post-graduation from Bombay University under the guidance of G.S. Ghurye. Ghurye encouraged him to conduct a short field-based study on marriage and family in Kannada state in Mysore, in Kannada caste of Mysore state. So while he was pursuing his post-graduation level, he conducted a short field study about the marriage and family of Kannada people. This study was submitted as dissertation, which was later published as a book titled Marriage and Family in Mysore in 1942. This is one of the important book of M.N. Srinivas. This book was published in 1942 and titled as Marriage and Family in Mysore, and it is based on the field study which he conducted during his post-graduation period under the guidance of G.S. Ghurye. Srinivas went to Oxford to undertake DPhil program. His research began under the supervision of Radcliffe Brown. It was the suggestion of Radcliffe Brown that he restudied the Kurg material using structural functional approach, the same material, Kurg material, which he studied under the guidance of Ghurye. But Radcliffe Brown inspired him to study the same material using the structural functional approach. And now he applied the structural functional approach to restudy the Kurg material. Later, he worked with Evan Pritchard when Radcliffe Brown left Oxford in 1946. After the retirement of Radcliffe Brown, he was guided by E. Evans Pritchard. Although Pritchard was not very much interested in the structural functional aspect, but again, he didn't want to disturb his study, so he continued with whatever he was pursuing. And this study was published as a book titled Religion and Society Among the Kurg of South India. So the first book was titled as Marriage and Family in Mysore state, and his second book was published with the title Religion and Society Among the Kurds of South India. In 1951, Srinivas returned to India after completing his DPhil degree. He founded the Department of Sociology in Baroda University. He started his career from Baroda University, where he started the Department of Sociology after coming back to India in 1951. In 1959, he was offered the newly established chair of sociology in Delhi School of Economics at Delhi University. So he worked at Delhi University in 1959 in Delhi School of Economics. Between 1966 and 69, he remained the president of Indian Sociological Society, that is ISS. So between 1966 and 69, he was the president of Indian Sociological Society. He started his career from University of Baroda, where he started the Department of Sociology. Then he eventually moved to University of Delhi in 1951, where he taught in Delhi School of Economics. And in 19 between 1966 to 69, he remained the president of Indian Sociological Society. He recognized the society's journals, the sociological bulletin. He reorganized the various journals and the bulletins of the society, sociological society. In year 1972, Srinivas returned to his home state of Karnataka. He joined the newly set up Institute for Social and Economic Changes as joint director, and he passed away in November 30th, 1999. Srinivas was born in Karnataka state in Brahmin family. He he got his graduate degree from University of Mysore. Then he moved to University of Bombay, where he was nurtured by Gure. Then he went to Oxford University, where he worked under the guidance of Radcliffe Brown and Evan Pritchard. He worked on Kurg caste of Mysore, and he published the books. Then, after coming back to India, he started his career from the Baroda University. Then he joined the University of Delhi. After this, he became the president of Indian Sociological Society, and then he reorganized various sociological bulletins and journals. In 1972, he returned to his hometown in the state of Karnataka, where he joined as a joint director in Institute of for Social Sciences and Economic Changes, and he passed away on November 30, 1999. This was a short biographical sketch of Aman Srinivas. Aman Srinivas is one of the eminent sociologists of India. He has given the concept of concept, very important concept like westernization, central idea. Srinivas, let us discuss the few central ideas of M.N. Srinivas. Srinivas is known for his writing on methods and prospects of sociological research, villages in India, and nation building, and many more themes. He wrote on many themes, especially on the villages in India. He vastly studied about the villages in India, various villages of India, topic. Then his central idea is based on the sociological research, caste, nation building, and many more other ideas. Structural functionalism. The first central idea is structural functionalism. Srinivas learned the concept of structure of social structure from Redcliffe Brown when he was doing his DPhil from Oxford University under the guidance of Redcliffe Brown. So he learned the concept of social structure from Redcliffe Brown. Later he became convinced of its Later he became convinced of its significance in the study of social life. Srinivas' work was supervised by E. E. Evans Pritchard in addition to A. R. Redcliffe Brown. Redcliffe Brown shaped his approach, and Evans Pritchard inspired his vision. His approach of structural functionalism was shaped by the Redcliffe Brown, and Redcliffe Brown inspired him about the significance of structural functionalism in social life, and Evans Pritchard inspired his vision. Redcliffe Brown's for structural functionalism and his treating social anthropology as a natural science. Pritchard. Evans Pritchard was not convinced by the Redcliffe Brown's vision of structural functionalism and his treating and Redcliffe Brown treats the social anthropology as a natural sciences. Evans Pritchard was not convinced by the idea of Redcliffe Brown. He was This idea was challenged by the Evans Pritchard. See the contrast. Here, M.N. Srinivas was guided by the Redcliffe Brown and by Evans Pritchard. Redcliffe Brown was convinced with the structural functionalism, and he compared the structural functionalism with natural sciences, but even Pritchard was not convinced with this idea. He was against this idea. Evans Pritchard critiqued the Redcliffe Brown's idea that societies are like natural systems that are governed by laws. Instead, Evan Pritchard proposed that interpretations were more important in understanding social reality. According to Redcliffe Brown, societies are like natural systems and they are governed by the laws. There are the certain laws, and if the society follows the laws, then the society will emerge as a good society. But according to Evan Pritchard, it is not at all possible to study society governed by the law. It is not equivalent to natural system. According to Evan Pritchard, interpretation is more important in understanding the social reality. But according to Redcliffe Brown, that to understand the social reality, structural functionalism plays an important role. Uh, Evan Pritchard was against this structural functionalism and this natural laws. According to him, it depends on the situation, how a society works, how an individual works, and the interpretation of those situations are more important, and it plays an important role in understanding the social reality rather than studying the society like a natural system which are governed by the laws, natural laws. Evan Pritchard, Evan Pritchard suggested that historical perspective was essential for holistic understanding of social life. Srinivas agreed with the Radcliffe structural functionalism Brown's approach. According to Evans Pritchard, that historical perspective is very important and it plays an important role or an essential role for the holistic understanding of social life. If you really want to understand the social life, the historical perspective is very important. History plays an important role in understanding of the social life according to Evan Pritchard. But Srinivas was more convinced with the Radcliffe structural functionalism approach. So, Evan Pritchard decided not to disturb his studies, and Srinivas continued with his studies on the basis of on the idea of structural based on the idea of structural functionalism. He concedes, though, that his perspective had shifted by the time he graduated from Oxford in 1951. He realized the significance of historical evidences in functioning of civilization. He also concluded that comparing social laws to scientific laws was pointless. While he was doing his DPhil, he was convinced with this structural functionalism idea. Srinivas was convinced with the structural functionalism idea of Radcliffe Brown, and he continued with his studies on the basis of structural functionalism idea. And according to Radcliffe Brown, one can understand this society as on the basis of certain natural laws, but Evan Pritchard was against this idea. He was not Evan Pritchard was not convinced with the idea, with the study of social sciences, social life like a natural sciences. He was against this idea. As we know that Srinivas was guided by Radcliffe Brown as well as by the Evans Pritchard during his DPhil program, but he was more convinced with the Srinivas was more convinced with the Radcliffe Brown, so he continued his DPhil studies under the structural functionalism approach of Brown. But later on, his perspective had shifted, and by that time he graduated from the Oxford in 1951. After completing his DPhil program, his perspective had shifted, and he realized that the historical data or the history plays an important role in study of society. It is very important to study the history, or the history plays a significant role in functioning of civilization. So it is very important to understand the historical aspect of any society to understand this society. It was the view of Evans Pritchard. After completing his DPhil program, Srinivas realized this that history plays an important role in functioning of civilization. And after this, he concluded that comparing social laws to scientific laws was pointless, as Radcliffe Brown's view was that it is that the social laws can be compared with the natural laws. We can study the social laws of the society as we can study the natural sciences. And during his program, DPhil program, Srinivas was influenced by Radcliffe Brown, but after completing his DPhil program, he concluded that comparing the social laws with scientific laws was pointless. Srinivas began to recognize the need of historical data in societal functioning and futility of underlying principles of structural functionalism. He did not limit himself to the structural functionalism method. So eventually, he realized the importance of the historical data, and he realized that one cannot study the social laws as we can study the natural laws. And he didn't limit himself to the structural functional methods. He sought to explore the meaning within and beyond the context. So he tried to interpret on the basis of the situations. So he tried to explore the meaning within and beyond the context. So he tried to interpret the situations and context. He tried to incorporate the meanings in course of analyzing major sociological conditions and processes such as dominant caste, Sanskritization, and westernization. So he tried to interpret the history and tried to explore the meaning or interpret the situation and the context of analyzing the major sociological conditions. Why some phenomenon is occurring or happening in this society. What is the history beyond this? He tried to understand the history behind that situation, as well as he tried to explain or explore the situation, right? So he explained, he interpreted, he has given the concepts like Sanskritization, westernization, and he described the dominant caste in detail. Srinivas maintained that the problem in Indian society, that is the agrarian conflicts, inequalities, ethnicity, communalism, and regionalism, should be understood in the context of interrelationship that connect them with other aspects of life. So the problems like agrarian crisis, like regionalism, like communalism, ethnicity problem, or problem of inequality are the problems because of their interrelationship with other aspect of life. So you cannot separate one aspect of society from the another aspect of the society. All aspects in the society are intermingled. One aspect interfere and influence the other aspect of the society. So according to mn Srinivas, all these problems are because of the interrelationship or intermingling of these problems with other aspects of the life or other aspects of the society. This approach would enable politician and administrator to see many options to resolve this problem. And if politicians and administrators understand this, there is an intermingling of the various problems and the aspects, then they can resolve these problems. Srinivas emphasized the importance of systematic comparison of society's problems, processes, and institutions with those of neighboring countries in the first phase and developing countries in the second. So, according to Srinivas, it is very important that there should be a comparison, a systematic comparison of the society's of the society's problems, about the comparison of society's institutions and processes of the neighboring countries, so that one could understand the society in a better way. And in the first phase, according to Srinivas, it is important to uh, systematically compare the society's problems of the neighboring countries, and then compare these problems or these institutions and processes with the developing countries in the second phase. Another central idea is the other in sociological studies. Anthropologists and sociologists commonly feel that they should study other culture rather than their own. So, Sociologists feel like that they should study the other culture rather than their own culture. Why they feel so? Because according to the sociologist and anthropologist, when you study your own culture, there are the chances of biasedness, or there are the chances, and the second problem is there are the chances of overlooking of the aspects, because you are well versed with that culture, so you can overlook the certain aspects which you feel like that these aspects are not important, but those aspects could be important. Even if those are not important, one should not overlook those aspects. And second is, because of your own culture, your sentiments could be associated with that culture, so there could be the uh, problem of biasedness. So anthropologists and sociologists, because of these two problems, anthropologists and sociologists feel that they should study the other culture rather than their own culture. Two of the main reasons are: first, the familiarity with one's own culture could result in overlooking certain important aspects of the culture, which I have explained earlier. Second is, one's own bias could influence the study. Srinivas was aware of the diversity of lifestyles and the coexistence throughout the country. For this reason, he set studied culture in his own country. As we all know, India is a country of diversity. Linguistic diversity is there, religion diversity is there, ethnic diversity is there, right? And Srinivas was well versed with the lifestyle, and he knew that there is a coexistence, that the people from the different ethnicity, from the different background, coexist throughout the country. So for this reason, he said studied the culture in his own country. According to him, it is not required to study the any other culture. You can study your own culture, because in India, because of the diversity in India, on the basis of language, on the basis of religion, on the basis of food habits, on the basis of their cultures, on the basis of their rituals, right? On the basis of the religion. So he set to study the culture in his own country. He reinterpreted the notion of other in anthropological and sociological studies. So, in this way, he reinterpreted the notion of other in anthropological and sociological study. Even your society could be other for you, right? Srinivas maintains difference of language, dialect, religion, sect, caste, class, ethnicity confront Indian anthropologists at every point, so they can find the other in the adjacent village, tribes, or the backward slum, right? So he redefined the notion of other, as we all know that India is a country of diversity, and this diversity is based on, is could be based on the language, on the basis of caste, class, ethnicity, sex, right, religion. And according to Srinivas, that one can find the other in India in the adjacent village, even in the backward slums or the tribe. So it is not at all required to study any other society. You can study your adjacent village. And then the another concept is book view versus field view. Srinivas was keen to differentiate between a book view of society based on religious literature and Indological perspective, and a field view of society in Indian context derived from in-depth field work and sociological approach. There are two views to study the society. The first view is known as the book view or Indological perspective. In the book view, We study society on the basis of religious literature or other literature and on the basis of history. G.S. Ghure was an Indological social scientist. His study was based on book view. Srinivas was very keen to differentiate between the book view of society and the field view of society. And the field view is where the sociologist or anthropologist or the researcher derived in depth knowledge from the field work, or in field view, a researcher collects the data, primary data, rather than collecting the data from the literature. So the study based on the books or the literature is known as book view, and field view is where the researcher collects where the researcher do the field work and collects the data from field and interpret that data. So Srinivas was very keen to differentiate between the book view of the society and the field view of the society. The book view of the society is based on the religious literature and an Indological perspective, and the field view of society in Indian context was derived from in-depth field work and a sociological approach. Gure was a Indological scientist. His study was based on the book views, and Iravati Karve or MNS Srinivas, they are field view type of the sociologist. Their studies were based on the field data collected from the fields. He noticed a significant gap between the book view of society and the field view of society. In reality, the disjunction between the two provided a unique viewpoint of understanding how caste regulate the social relations across time. According to him, both book view and field view is important, and he noticed that disjunction between the two provided a unique viewpoint on understanding how caste regulate the social relation across the time. That the caste is the age-old phenomenon in India, and he tried to find out how the books interpreted the caste system in India, and how in reality or in today's India, how it works, what is the difference. So he provided a unique viewpoint on understanding how caste regulates the social relation across the time. The social relation changes with time, right? Srinivas was attempting to establish a significance of field view for study of Indian society and culture. So he tried to establish the significance of the field view. According to Srinivas, the field view is very important for the study of Indian society and culture. Dumont's Homo Hararicus, which was published in 1970, introduced the book view in academic circle, and the impact of this book was so much that for many sociologists, book view gained more important than the field view. On one side, Srinivas was attempting to establish the the significance of the field view for the sociological studies, And on the other hand, the Dumont's book Homo Hararicus. This book is one of the important book. He described the caste system in very detail. This book was published in 1917, right? And this book is based on the literature, on the basis he published this book, or he wrote this book on the basis of the literature, on the basis of the religious literature and other historical literature available. So why when this Srinivas was trying to establish the field view in India, at the same time Dumont's Homo Hararicus introduced the book view in the academic circle, and this book was very important, and this impacted a lot. This impacted the sociological circle, and this gained the more importance. This book gained the book view gained the more importance than the field view. Villages in India. Srinivas studied about the villages, about Indian villages. Srinivas believed that village studies were the best way to learn about Indian society, culture, and civilization. If anyone wants to study, if anyone wants to understand India, it is important that they should study, they should know about the villages. So Srinivas believed that village studies are the best way to study the Indian society, to study about the Indian culture and the civilization. Srinivas made a significant contribution to realistic understanding of a village. The Select Committee on the Affairs of the East India Company's fifth report treated the village regarded as a little republic, a stagnant, passive, and unchanging entity. According to the fifth report, which was published by the Select Committee on the Affairs of East India Company, according to them, a village is an entity which is stagnant. Village is an unchangeable entity according to this report. You cannot change the village, and this is village is a little republic. Why it is a little republic? Um, because of community feeling, because of their we feeling. They because in village they are able to fulfill all their needs within a given geographical areas. These village people have we feeling. So this report said that it is a little republic. A village is a stagnant, passive, and unchangeable entity. Srinivas countered this overly simplistic view by bringing out the reality of Indian villages. He studied about Indian villages, and he countered this report. He shed light on inequalities, diseases, and illiteracy as also village resources. Village, there is much inequality in villages. He described about the diseases. He described about the illiteracy of the village people. Srinivas brought out the point that rather than being egalitarian, a village were driven by hierarchy and influence of politics. According to Srinivas, villages are driven by the hierarchy. There is a well defined hierarchy, and this hierarchy could be based on the caste. This could be a caste based hierarchy, and this drives the villages. And the influence of politics drives the villages. Srinivas drew attention to gap between lived reality in villages and perceived or imagined reality in the minds of policy makers. So he tried to describe the gap in the minds of the policy maker, that what is the actual reality of the villages, and what is perceived or imagined reality of the villages. Because if they will make the policies according to the actual realities, it will really benefit the village people. But if the policy makers make the policies on the basis of the perceived or the imagined reality, there will be hardly any impact of these policies on the lives of the village people. So he tried to draw the attention of the gap between the village actual reality and the perceived reality. Srinivas emphasized the role of self defense, collective fight, and local governance in the metrics of village life. So, where the factors like self defense, like collective fight, like local governance, he Srinivas emphasized on these factors. People of the villages defend themselves, they fight collectively, and they govern their administration locally. These are the factors which plays an important role in villages, and Srinivas emphasized on these roles. In pre-British period, both political and economic factor combined to hinder the formation of horizontal ties beyond political boundaries. There were certain political and economic factors, and these factors tried to hinder the formation of horizontal ties. Caste. Another aspect which Srinivas studied is caste. Srinivas discussed the importance of caste in managing social ties. According to Srinivas, caste plays an important role in society. Caste plays an important role in managing the social ties. This was illustrated in specific settings of Rampura. He studied the Rampura village of Mysore. Srinivas established that caste hierarchy was one of the several forms of rigorous social stratification that were hostile to individuality. He studied about the caste system in specific settings of Rampura. Rampura is a village in Mysore district. He studied about the caste system of the Rampura, and he concluded, he established that there is a caste hierarchy. There is a hierarchy in the caste, and um, this hierarchy is one of the several forms of rigorous social stratification. Caste plays an important role in social stratification, right? Historically, there was a great deal of connection among various castes. Members of one caste were always reliant on the commodities and service provided by the member of other caste. If we go through these studies, we will come to know that the one caste depends on the another caste for the services and for the commodities, right? These castes are interdependent, right? Like for that the Brahmins depends on the peasants or the farmers for their food, and these farmers depends on these Brahmins for to conduct their rituals. Similarly, they are dependent on traders. So historically, there is a connection between various castes, they are interdependent. People from one caste compete for the commodities and services given by the other caste, which occasionally resulted in conflict. Yes, they are dependent on the other caste for the services and for the commodities, and at times they compete for those services and the commodities, and this results in the conflicts. In Rampura village, the peasant population was the largest, and the headman of a village was a peasant. All this made their social, economic, and political position in the village the strongest. He studied about the caste in the Rampur village, and in Rampur village, the majority was of the peasant, right? Peasant were in the largest number, and the headman of that society was a peasant, and this made the social, economic, and political position of the peasant in that village the strongest. So the economically the peasants were strongest, politically they have hold, and socially they hold the positions. Peasants hold the position in the Rampura. Brahmins and Lingayats also respected them in spite of the fact that peasants belong to the Shudra Varna, right? He that Srinivas established that caste plays an important role in social stratification. There is a hierarchy in a caste, right? Some castes are known as Dvij caste, like Brahman and Kshatriyas are known as Dvij, right? मतलब twice born. They are known as twice born, Brahmin, Kshatriya. So the Brahmins are on the top of the hierarchy. Then come the Kshatriyas, then the Vaishyas, then the uh, Shudras, and then comes untouchable, right? Then these Brahmins and Lingayats respects those peasants in spite those peasants, despite of the fact that they belongs to the Shudra Varna. So this because these peasants were in larger number in Rampura, and the headman of the Rampura was from this caste. Brahmin and Lingayats remain dominant in the ritual domain only. Brahman and Lingayats were dominant in the ritual domain only, but in other domain like in economic forum, socially, politically, these peasants were dominant. For the support in all other aspects of life, they depends on the peasants, and peasants resolve the disputes between the high caste people and untouchable. See, these peasants were involved in dispute resolving between the high caste people and the untouchable, and these Brahmins and Lingayats depends on the peasant for their needs. The only aspect, the only field in which these Lingayats and Brahmins were dominant were the ritual domain. The Rampura study inspired Srinivas to develop the concept of dominant caste. So he developed a concept of dominant caste. In his own word, that is in Srinivas' words, a caste may be said to be dominant when it preponderates numerically over the other castes, and when it also wields preponderant economic and political power. A large and powerful caste group can be more easily dominant if its position in the local caste hierarchy is not too low. So he has given the concept of the dominant caste, and according to Srinivas, a caste may be said to be dominant if they are large in number, if numerically they are more, or if the members of that caste in a particular geographical area is more, and they have because of their larger number, uh, uh, they have economic and social power, right? If they are economically sound, if they are politically sound, then that caste could be a dominant caste in that area, that given geographical area. So to be a dominant caste, the three factors which he described is the number of the members of that caste, economically sound conditions of that caste, and the political positions which the members of that caste followed. And the that caste could be easily dominant, easily grab the position of dominance if the local caste in the hierarchy is not too low, right? So it could be easier if in hierarchy that caste is not too low. Another factor which has been critical in deciding dominance in amount of educated male and their vocation. Often, Western and traditional education determines the dominance. Srinivas referred to the aspects of Western. So, apart from larger numbers, numerically, they should be in larger in number. So, and their economic conditions, their political positions, education plays an important role. If people of that caste are educated, if people are educated, then that caste could dominate that geographical area, right? According to Srinivas, most essential characteristics of dominations are numerical strength, economic and political power, ritual status, and Western education and occupation is another factor which plays an important role. So the factors which plays an important role in domination are the numerical strength, economic factors, so political factor, ritual status, Western education, and the occupation. In a community, the various elements of power are usually distributed among distinct castes. A caste is said to be dominant when it possesses all or most of the elements of dominance, right? So, a caste is said to be dominant when all or most of the factors, when the caste possesses all or most of the factors. Another factor, another central idea is social mobility. Social mobility, Srinivas emphasized the mobility within the caste framework. Here, he has given the concept of Sanskritization, which is one of the very important concepts given by the Srinivas. He cites two sources of mobility in pre-British areas: the flexibility in political system, particularly at lower level, and the availability of marginal land that might be cultivated. So, political system and the land owning were the two criterias in the pre-British areas of dominance. Prior to British governments, the political power was typically taken by the leaders of the powerful castes, which could fight battles and shift loyalties often. The Kshatriya Varna was made up of several castes. Each of the castes constituting the Kshatriya Varna held the political power. So the Kshatriya Varna, there are various castes included in the Kshatriya Varna, right? And these Kshatriya Varnas actually hold the political power because of their ability to fight. It was for this reason when the leader of dominant caste rose to the position of a ruler, he claimed to the status of Kshatriya. He inspired others and emerged as a source of mobility for others. See, mobility within the caste. There are various castes in the Kshatriya Varna. When some caste uh, um, uh, when some caste or when the leader of a specific caste rose to the position of a ruler, he claimed to the status of the Kshatriya, and this improves his position in this society. This is known as the social mobility because he moves up. He inspired others from emerged as a source of mobility for others. As a result of British rule, new source of mobility emerged. According to Srinivas, the British pushed the following as a key of source of mobility in contemporary India. The concept of land ownership and economic opportunities in the port cities and the capital cities. So this encouraged the individual of all castes to purchase the lands. So land ownership is another aspect in pre-British areas, which impacted the social mobility. In times of economic distress, persons of the high castes residing in the cities sold their land to the peasant and other castes in the villages, and ownership of the land offered them the prestige and status. So, the ownership during the pre-British area, those who rules they were known as the rulers, and this they hold the political power, economic power, and during the British era, the ownership, land ownership and economic opportunities is one of the factor responsible for the social mobility, right? New values with it, with focus on equality, assertion of one's right, and freedom to practice one faith, which came with modern knowledge. The newly westernized Indian geared up to reform the society. The new economic system and the expansion of the communication network connected to the country internally with the rest of the globe, the upper caste sucked up the majority of educational and economic chances, and because the upper class sucked up the chances, so this widened the gap or the inequalities between the upper caste and the lower caste. New trading and the employment opportunities such as roads, railways, transportation, canal construction also benefited several castes. Liberty to acquire symbols and ritual of higher caste that inspired lower caste to wear sacred thread. The regionally dominant caste resisted, often resorting to violence and economic boycott. Such movement, however, not always successful since victims file a complaint with police and file a lawsuits in the court. And conversion to Islam, Christianity, and sects such as Sikhism and Arya Samaj, many converts found they took this stigma with them into new folds as well. Srinivas in 1968 presents a typical type of mobility in which the caste is contrasted with the class among the educated people in the big cities. They take up the activities that have little to do with their conventional caste employment back in the villages. Such people can conveniently flout pollution norms, mingle with, and even marry a person who don't adhere to the casteist standards. In such instances, rather than the caste emerges as an organized element in the lifestyle and the interpersonal relationship. Lower castes are inspired by the upper caste to strive for upward social mobility. One of the chief means by which lower caste move up the ladder of social stratification is process of Sanskritization. So what is the process of Sanskritization? That is moving up of the lower caste, moving up of the lower caste in social stratification is known as the Sanskritization. How they can do this? They can do this. How they can move up? How they can move up the ladder? they can move up the ladder um, by following the rituals, customs, rites, and beliefs of the Brahmins and adopted a Brahminic way of life. How a lower caste can move up the ladder of the hierarchy, and this moving up a ladder from a lower caste to the upper caste is known as Sanskritization. And how this process could be done? This could be done by adopting a Brahminic way of life, and this process is known as Sanskritization. And this is one of the very important concept given by the M.N. Srinivas, that is moving up of lower caste to the higher caste in social stratification, and they can do it by adopting a Brahminic way of life. That's all for today. Thank you very much. Namaskar.